Okay, there we are. Sorry. Um, yeah, welcome to the Cultured Bumpkin. It's been a little bit. Been in Colorado. I did a couple of lives, but now I'm back on, excuse me, Moby Dick. And this is chapter 20, All Astir. A day or two passed. A day or two passed, and there was great activity aboard the Pequod. Not only were the old sails being mended, but new sails were coming on board, and bolts of canvas and coils of rigging. In short, everything betokened that the ship's preparations were hurrying to a close. Captain Peleg seldom or never went ashore, but sat in his wigwam, keeping a sharp lookout upon the hands. Bildad did all the purchasing and providing at the stores, and the men employed in the hold and on the rigging were working till long after nightfall. On the day following Queequeg's signing the articles, word was given at all the inns where the ship's company were stopping that their chests must be on board before night, for there was no telling how soon the vessel might be sailing. So Queequeg and I got down our traps, resolving, however, to sleep ashore till the last. But it seems that they always give very long notice in these cases, and the ship did not sail for several days. But no wonder. There was a good deal to be done, and there was no telling how many things to be thought of before the Pequod was fully equipped. Everyone knows what a multitude of things beds, saucepans, knives and forks, shovels and tongs, napkins, nutcrackers, and whatnot are indispensable to the business of housekeeping. Just so with whaling, which necessitates a 3 years' housekeeping upon the wide ocean, far from all grocers, costermongers, doctors, bakers, and bankers. And though this also holds true of merchant vessels, yet not by any means to the same extent as with whalemen. For besides the great length of the whaling voyage, the numerous articles peculiar to the prosecution of the fishery, and the impossibility of replacing them at the remote harbors usually frequented, it must be remembered that of all ships, whaling vessels are the most exposed to accidents of all kinds, and especially to the destruction and loss of the very things upon which the success of the voyage most depends. Hence the spare boats, spare spars, and spare lines and harpoons, and spare everythings, almost, but a captain and duplicate ship. At the period of our arrival at the island, the heaviest storage of the Pequod had been almost completed, comprising her beef, bread, water, fuel, and iron hoops and staves. But, as before hinted, for some time there was a continual fetching and carrying on board of divers odds and ends of things, both large and small. Good evening, good evening. Good to see you too. Good to have you in here. And yeah, back at it after a week off from Moby Dick. I was traveling, but now we're back in the old office. So, okay. Chief among those who did this fetching and carrying was Captain Bildad's sister, a lean old lady of a most determined and indefatigable spirit, but withal very kind-hearted, who seemed resolved that, if she could help it, nothing should be found wanting in the Pequod after once fairly getting to sea. At one time she would come aboard with a pair of pickles. At one time she would come on board with a jar of pickles for the steward's pantry. Another time with a bunch of quills for the chief mate's desk, where he kept his log. A third time with a roll of flannel for the small of someone's rheumatic back. Never did any woman better deserve her name, which was Charity, Aunt Charity, as everybody called her. And like a sister of charity did this charitable Aunt Charity bustle about hither and thither, ready to turn her hand and heart to anything that promised to yield safety, comfort, and consolation to all on board a ship in which her beloved brother Bildad was concerned, and in which she herself owned a score or two of well-saved dollars. But it was startling to see this excellent-hearted Quakeress coming on board as she did the last day, with a long oil ladle in one hand and still longer whaling lance in the other. Nor was Bildad himself, nor Captain Peleg at all backward. As for Bildad, he carried about with him a long list of the articles needed, and at every fresh arrival down went his mark opposite that article upon the paper. Every once in a while, Peleg came hobbling out of his whalebone den, roaring at the men down the hatchways, roaring up at the riggers at the masthead, and then concluded by roaring back into his wigwam. During these days of preparation, Queequeg and I often visited the craft, and as often I asked about Captain Ahab and how he was, and when was he coming on board this, and when he was coming on board this, and when he was coming on board his ship. To these questions they would answer that he was getting better and better and was expected aboard every day. Meantime, the two captains, Peleg and Bildad, could attend to everything necessary to fit the vessel for the voyage. If I had been downright honest with myself, I would have seen very plainly in my heart that I did not but half fancy being committed this way to so long a voyage without once laying my eyes on the man who was to be absolute dictator of it, so soon as the ship sailed upon the open sea. But when a man suspects any wrong, it sometimes happens that if he be already involved in the matter, he insensibly strives to cover up his suspicions, even from himself. And much this way it was with me. I said nothing and tried to think nothing. At last it was given out that sometime next day the ship would certainly sail. So next morning, Queequeg and I took a very early start. Oh, that's cool, man. You're working on an audiobook? That is awesome. That is very cool, and I appreciate that. Yeah, I think when you're recording, if you sort of, once you get the feel for the writer's rhythm, because every writer, it's like they have their own little rhythm. Once you find it, you'll still make mistakes and stuff, obviously. I mean, I do anyway, but it becomes easier. And sometimes they're book by book, like with Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice is on a different tune or rhythm than like Northanger Abbey. It's interesting how that is. I don't know how to describe it, but anyway, yeah. Once you sort of get that rhythm, you're good. All right, that was chapter 20. Let's do another one. Chapter 21, Going Aboard. It was nearly 6 o'clock, but only gray, imperfect, misty dawn when we drew nigh the wharf. "There's some sailors running ahead there, if I see right," said I to Queequeg. "It can't be Shadow. She's off by sunrise, I guess. Come on." "Avast!" cried a voice, whose owner at the same time, coming close behind us, laid a hand upon our shoulders, and then, insinuating himself between us, stood stooping forward a little in the uncertain twilight, strangely peering from Queequeg to me. It was Elijah. "Going aboard?" "Hands off, will you?" said I. "Looky here," said Queequeg, shaking himself. "Go away." "Ain't going aboard, then?" "Yes, we are," said I, "but what business is that of yours? Do you know, Mr. Elijah, that I consider you a little impertinent?" No, I wasn't aware of that," said Elijah, slowly and wonderingly looking from me to Queequeg with the most unaccountable glances. "Elijah," said I, "you will oblige my friend and me by withdrawing. We're going to the Indian and Pacific Oceans and would prefer not to be detained. Ye be ye? Coming back afore breakfast?" "He's cracked, Queequeg," said I. "Come on." "Hello!" cried stationary Elijah, hailing us when we had removed a few paces. "Never mind him," said I. "Queequeg, come on." But he stole up to us again and suddenly, clapping his hand on my shoulder, said, "Do you see anything looking like a man? Did you see anything looking like men going towards that ship a while ago?" Struck by this plain, matter-of-fact question, I answered, saying, Yes, I thought I did see 4 or 5 men, but it was too dim to be sure. Very dim, said Elijah. Morning to you. Once more we quitted him, but once more he came softly after us, and touching my shoulder again said, See if you can find him now, will you? Find who? Morning to you, he rejoined, again moving off. Oh, I was going to warn you against, but never mind. It's all one. All the family, too. Sharp frost this morning, ain't it? Goodbye to you. Shan't see you again very soon, I guess, unless it's before the grand jury. And with these cracked words, he finally departed, leaving me for the moment in no small wonderment at his frantic impudence. At last, stepping on board the Pequod, we found everything in profound quiet, not a soul moving. The cabin entrance was locked within. The hatches were all on and lumbered with coils of rigging. Going forward to the forecastle, we found the slide of the scuttle open. Seeing a light, we went down and found only an old rigger there, wrapped in a tattered pea coat. He was thrown at whole length upon 2 chests, his face downwards and enclosed in his folded arms. The profoundest slumber slept upon him. Oh, okay. Sorry, lost my place. Okay. All right, good deal. I'm going to let's see. I got one little thing here. Sam's Zero Sugar Cola. It's probably just terrible for you, but it's very tasty, and I like it. All right. Where were we? Here we go. Sorry about that. A little late. Those sailors we saw, Queequeg, where can they have gone to? Said I, looking dubiously at the sleeper. But it seemed that when on the wharf, Queequeg had not at all noticed what I now alluded to. Hence, I would have thought myself to have been optically deceived in that matter, were it not for Elijah's otherwise inexplicable question. But I beat the thing down, and again, marking the sleeper, jocularly hinted to Queequeg that perhaps we had best sit up with the body, telling him to establish himself accordingly. He put his hand upon the sleeper's rear, as though feeling if it was soft enough, and then, without more ado, sat quietly down there. Gracious, Queequeg, don't sit there, said I. Oh, Perry dude's seat, said Queequeg. My country way. Won't hurt him face. Face, said I. You call that his face? Very benevolent countenance, then. But how hard he breathes. He's heaving himself. Get off, Queequeg. You're heavy. It's grinding the face of the port. Get off, Queequeg. Look, he'll twitch you off soon. I wonder he don't wake. Queequeg removed himself to just beyond the head of the sleeper and lighted his tomahawk pipe. I sat at the feet. We kept the pipe passing over the sleeper from one to the other. Meanwhile, upon questioning him in his broken fashion, Queequeg gave me to understand that in his land, owing to the absence of settees and sofas of all sorts, the king, chiefs, and great people generally were in the custom of fattening some of the lower orders for ottomans, and to furnish a house comfortably in that respect, you had only to buy up 8 or 10 lazy fellows and lay them around in the piers and alcoves. Besides, it was very convenient on an excursion, much better than those garden chairs which are convertible into walking sticks. Upon occasion, a chief calling his attendant and desiring him to make a settee of himself under a spreading tree, perhaps in some damp marshy place. While narrating these things, every time Queequeg received the tomahawk from me, he flourished the hatchet side of it over the sleeper's head. What's that for, Queequeg? Very easy, Killy. Oh, very easy. He was going on with some wild reminiscences about his tomahawk pipe, which, it seemed, had in its 2 uses both brained his foes, and soothed his soul when we were directly attracted to the sleeping rigger. The strong vapor now completely filling the contracted hole, it began to tell upon him. He breathed with a sort of muffledness, then seemed troubled in the nose, then revolved over once or twice, then sat up and rubbed his eyes. "Hello," he breathed at last. "Who be ye smokers?" "Shipped men," answered I. "When does she sail?" Aye, you're going to be with her, be ye? She sails today. The captain came aboard last night." What captain? Ahab? "Who indeed but him?" I was going to ask him some further questions concerning Ahab when we heard a noise on deck. "Hello, Starbuck's astir," said the rigger. "He's a lively chief mate, that good man and a pious, but all alive now. I must turn to." And so saying, he went on deck, and we followed. It was now clear sunrise. Soon the crew came aboard in twos and threes. The riggers bestirred themselves. The mates were actively engaged, and several of the shore people were busy in bringing various last things on board. Meanwhile, Captain Ahab remained invisibly enshrined within his cabin. All right, that's the end of chapter 21. Audiobook narrating. Usually 45 minutes. That's my limit. And then I have to take a little break if I don't take little breaks before. I think everybody's has their limit, and everybody's probably different. Mine is about 45. And if I go much longer than that, I can start to hear the fatigue in my voice, and I sound a little bit bored. So I always take little breaks just so that way I keep it going. Keep the interest up or whatever. Chapter 22. Merry Christmas. At length, towards noon, upon the final dismissal of the ship's riggers, and after the Pequod had been hauled out from the wharf, and after the ever-thoughtful Charity had come off in a whaleboat with her last gift, a nightcap for Stubb, the second mate, her brother-in-law, and a spare Bible for the steward, after all this, the two captains, Peleg and Bildad, issued from the cabin, and turning to the chief mate, Peleg said, "Now, Mr. Starbuck, are you sure everything's right? Captain Ahab is all ready. Just spoke to him. Nothing more to be got from shore, eh? Well, call all hands then. Muster 'em aft here. Blast 'em." "No need for profane words, however great the hurry, Peleg," said Bildad. "But away with thee, friend Starbuck, and do our bidding." How now, here upon the very point of starting for the voyage, Captain Peleg and Captain Bildad were going at it with a high hand on the quarterdeck, just as if they were to be joint commanders at sea, as well as to all appearances in port. As for Captain Ahab, no sign of him was to be seen. Only they said he was in the cabin. And then the idea was that his presence was by no means necessary in getting the ship under way and steering her well out to sea. Indeed, as that was not at all his proper business, but the pilot's, and as he was not yet completely recovered, so they said, therefore Captain Ahab stayed below. And all this seemed natural enough, especially as in the merchant service many captains never show themselves on deck for a considerable time after heaving up the anchor, but remain over the cabin table, having a farewell merrymaking with their shore friends before they quit the ship for good with the pilot. But there was not much chance to think over the matter, for Captain Peleg was now all alive. He seemed to do most of the talking and commanding, and not Bildad. "Aft there, you sons of bachelors!" he cried, as the sailors lingered at the mainmast. "Mr. Starbuck, drive aft!" "Strike the tents there," was the next order. As I hinted before, this whalebone marquee was never pitched except in port, and on board the Pequod for 30 years, the order to strike the tent was well known to be the next thing to heaving up the anchor. "Man the capstan! Blood and thunder, jump!" was the next command, and the crew sprang for the handspikes. Now, in getting under way, the station generally occupied by the pilot is the forward part of the ship. And here Bildad, who with Peleg, be it known, in addition to his other officers, was one of the licensed pilots of the port, he being suspected to have got himself made pilot in order to save the Nantucket pilot fee to all the ships he was concerned in, for he never piloted any other craft. Bildad, I say, might now be seen actively engaged and looking over the bows for the approaching anchor, and at intervals singing in what seemed a dismal stave of psalmody to cheer the hands at the windlass, who roared forth some sort of chorus about the girls in Booble Alley with hearty goodwill. Nevertheless, not 3 days previous, Bildad had told them that no profane songs would be allowed on board the Pequod, particularly in getting under way. In charity, his sister had placed a small choice copy of Watts in each seaman's berth. Meantime, overseeing the other part of the ship, Captain Peleg ripped and swore astern in the most frightful manner. I almost thought he would sink the ship before the anchor could be got up. Involuntarily, I paused on my handspike and told Queequeg to do the same, thinking of the perils we both ran in starting on the voyage with such a devil for a pilot. I was comforting myself, however, with the thought that in pious Bildad might be found some salvation, spite of his 777th lay, when I felt a sudden sharp poke in my rear, and turning round, was horrified at the apparition of Captain Peleg in the art of withdrawing his leg from my immediate vicinity. That was my first kick. "Is that the way they heave in the merchant service?" he roared. "Spring, thou sheephead! Spring and break thy backbone! Why don't you spring, I say, all of you? Spring! Quahog! Spring, thou chap with the red whiskers! Spring there, Scotch cap! Spring, thou green pants! Spring, I say, all of you, and spring your eyes out!" And so saying, he moved along the windlass, here and there, using his leg very freely, while imperturbable Bildad kept leading off with his psalmody. Thinks I, Captain Peleg must have been drinking something today. At last, the anchor was up. The sails were set, and off we glided. It was a short, cold Christmas, and as the short northern day merged into night, we found ourselves almost broad upon the wintry ocean, whose freezing spray cased us in ice as in polished armor. The long rows of teeth on the bulwarks glistened in the moonlight, and like the white ivory tusks of some huge elephant, vast curving icicles depended from the bows. Lank Bildad, as pilot, headed the first watch, and ever and anon, as the old craft deep-dived into the green seas and sent the shivering frost all over her, and the winds howled and the cordage rang, his steady notes were heard. Sweet fields beyond the swelling flood stand dressed in living green. So to the Jews old Canaan stood, while Jordan rolled between. Never did those sweet words sound more sweetly to me than then. They were full of hope and fruition, spite of this frigid winter night in the boisterous Atlantic, spite of my wet feet and wetter jacket. There was yet, it then seemed to me, many a pleasant haven in store, and meads and glades so eternally vernal that the grass shot up by the spring, untrodden, unwilted, remains at midsummer. At last we gained such an offing that the two pilots were needed no longer. The stout sailboat that had accompanied us began ranging alongside. It was curious and not unpleasing how Peleg and Bildad were affected at this juncture, especially Captain Bildad. For loath to depart, yet very loath to leave for good, a ship bound on so long and perilous a voyage, beyond both stormy capes, a ship in which some thousands of his hard-earned dollars were invested, a ship in which an old shipmate sailed as captain, a man almost as old as he, once more starting to encounter all the terrors of the pitiless jaw, loath to say goodbye to a thing so every way brimful of interest to him. Poor old Bildad lingered long, paced the deck with anxious strides, ran down into the cabin to speak another farewell word there, again came on deck and looked to windward, looked towards the wide and endless waters, only bound by the far-off, unseen eastern continents, looked towards the land, looked aloft, looked right and left, looked everywhere and nowhere, and at last, mechanically coiling a rope upon its pin, convulsively grasped stout Peleg by the hand and, holding up a lantern, for a moment stood, gazing heroically in his face, as much as to say, "Nevertheless, friend Peleg, I can stand it. Yes, I can." As for Peleg himself, he took it more like a philosopher. But for all his philosophy, there was a tear twinkling in his eye when the lantern came too near, and he, too, did not a little run from the cabin to deck, now a word below, and now a word with Starbuck, the chief mate. But at last he turned to his comrade with a sort of look about him. "Captain Bildad, come, old shipmate, we must go. Back to the mainyard there. Boat ahoy! Stand by! Come close alongside now. Careful, careful! Come, Bildad, boy, say your last. Luck to you, Starbuck. Luck to you, Mr. Stubb. Luck to you, Mr. Flask. Goodbye, and good luck to you all. And this day 3 years I'll have a hot supper smoking for you in old Nantucket. Hurrah and away! God bless you. God bless you, and God bless you and have you in his holy keeping." "God bless you and have you in his holy keeping, men," murmured old Bildad almost incoherently. "I hope you'll have fine weather now, so that Captain Ahab may soon be moving among you. A pleasant sun is all he needs, and you'll have plenty of 'em in the tropic voyage as you go. Be careful in the hunt, you mates. Don't stave the boats needlessly, you harpooners. Good white cedar plank is raised full 3 cents within the year. Don't forget your prayers either. Mr. Starbuck, mind that cooper. Don't waste the spare staves. Oh, the sail needles are in the green locker. Don't whale it too much on the Lord's Day. Don't whale it too much on the Lord's Day, men, but don't miss a fair chance either. That's rejecting heaven's good gifts. Have an eye to the molasses tierce, Mr. Stubb. It was a little leaky, I thought. If you touch at the islands, Mr. Flask, beware of fornication. Goodbye, goodbye. Don't keep that cheese too long down in the hold, Mr. Starbuck. It'll spoil. Be careful with the butter. 20 cents a pound it was. And mind you, come, Captain Bildad. Stop palavering away." And with that, Peleg hurried him over the side, and both dropped into the boat. Ship and boat diverged. The cold, damp night breeze blew between. A screaming gulf flew overhead, and the two hulls wildly rolled. We gave 3 heavy-hearted cheers and blindly plunged like fate into the lone Atlantic. So they are off. All right. Well, that was 3 chapters, and yeah. So I'm going to call that a night. And it's very hot in here. And hopefully I'll be back at it tomorrow evening. So thank you very much for watching, and good to see you. And I will talk at you later.